All right, so today we're talking about branding. So, our learning goals for today are to find out what branding is exactly, what makes a brand valuable, why do businesses brand themselves, and what are the three main types of brands. So, what's a brand? It's one of the most powerful tools that a company has in its arsenal, and essentially it's an image or identity, the way that a consumer sees the business or thinks about the products that the business makes or sells. I don't know what's happening with the font there, but anyway. From the consumer point of view, it's a gut feeling because people are emotional and intuitive beings. First impressions are made very quickly, and we try not to judge, but people are instinctively judgmental. It's a survival mechanism. It's a tool that our brain uses to help us approach decisions and people and scenarios. We judge all the time. And a brand it's a catalyst for the judgments that people make about a business, a product, anything. And brands are defined, and this is the important part, brands are defined by the consumers, by the individuals, not by the companies, markets, or the public. And that's a big one. A lot of business owners and a lot of people in general think that a brand image, it's up to the business, right? They decide what their brand is. That's not the case. It's not what the businesses say it is. It's what the customers say it is. And it's what they think it is. Now, don't get me wrong, businesses have a lot of control over setting the table, over deciding what kind of image they want to put out there. But consumers have reactions to how products work and how companies operate and how they feel about all that. And so businesses can say, we want you to think this, and they can show you things in the hopes of making you feel something. But at the end of the day, whether you feel that or not, or whether you think that or not, comes down to you. And so ultimately, you guys and me and all the other consumers in the world decide what a brand identity really is. And it's what we think about a company. So why is branding so hot? Branding has received more and more attention over the past 40 years. And the reason for it is threefold. The first reason is people have too many choices to make in too little time. And our impressions and judgments about brands and companies help us make decisions easier, help us make purchasing decisions easier. It's very easy to make a decision based off an instinct that you feel about a company that you get from judging their brand. And it's a feeling that you have, like most offerings, and by that I mean most products that businesses sell, are very similar as far as quality and features go, particularly with direct competitors. Hopefully you guys remember that term. When you get down to it, they really aren't very different when we're talking about direct competitors. If we were to look at, say, cheeseburgers, they both have buns, they both have hamburgers, they both have cheese, they both have optional toppings for pretty much whatever you'd want. And they both probably have a signature ingredient to throw in the ring. Like McDonald's could throw in their special sauce, and Wendy's could throw in, their authentic sauce or their Baconator mushroom sauce. Or I don't have fast food anymore, so I don't really remember all the different toppings and stuff like that. But every company tries to distinguish themselves with design features, hopefully you remember that term, and benefits of use and all the other unsustainable advantages. But really, they're not very different. At their core, they're almost the same thing. And we tend to base our buying choices on trust. When you're buying a product, whether it's food or clothing or technology, you have a trust built up between the brands that you're familiar with. It's one of the reasons why people usually either go Android or Apple, and when they choose Android or Apple, for Apple, you can only go Apple. You can't go in another direction. But for Android, most people go with Samsung. And the reason for that is that Samsung has built up a trust. Their brand carries a certain weight with it. And once you've had an iPhone, you've built a trust up in terms of what you expect an iPhone to do and how you expect it to work, and the quality that you can expect to get from the cameras and the screen and everything else. And all that trust is placed in Apple's brand. And Apple has worked extraordinarily hard to build this trust across all the products that it has. And so has Samsung, and so has Sony and LG, and some companies do these better than others. And in the Android world, Samsung has the strongest brand presence, and that's why most people who go Android have Samsung Galaxy phones. The reason I'm focusing on the Samsung is because with Apple, you either have an Apple iPhone or you don't. You can't get a different company's phone that's also an iPhone with the Mac iOS. It just doesn't happen that way. But anyway, so back to branding. Branding is establishing an identity for the product that differentiates it from the competition. And by that I mean it separates it from the competition. It helps you stand apart. It helps you attract consumers' attention. It helps you stand out in the market. Remember we talked about that from last lesson? All the different consumers and suppliers of a certain product type, it helps you stand out amongst the crowd. Now, a brand itself is made out of a brand name, a logo, a slogan, and trademark, and it creates brand loyalty. And we know Garrett will love that one. Each of these different things appeals to a different part of the human psyche. So, in terms of establishing trust, companies try to make this trust as instinctual as possible. So they try to establish a visual form of trust. They try to establish a linguistic form of trust. They try to establish a conceptual form of trust. And they do that through these different tools. And we're going to look at those tools very briefly. So to start off with, a brand name is letters, words, or numbers that can be verbalized. Basic stuff, right? A brand name should say something about the product or the company. And in terms of Coca-Cola, they have worked... to begin with, Coca-Cola owns a ton of companies. They own... I couldn't even list them all off. Coke owns so much stuff, it's insane. Do you know that Coca-Cola owns Santa Claus? I think we may have talked about that in class, and some people know this already, but a lot of people don't know that Coca-Cola owns Santa Claus. Santa Claus, you all know that Santa Claus isn't real. Hopefully I didn't just break someone's heart. If I did, I'm going to feel so bad. But hopefully you all know that Santa Claus isn't real. But what a lot of people don't know is that he's not a folk's tale. He's not a cultural tale. He is intellectual property of Coca-Cola. Now, Santa Claus is based off of a folk's tale about jolly old Saint Nicholas, but that's a whole different thing. But Coke created Santa Claus as a way of forming a brand identity and forming trust in Coca-Cola. They wanted people to associate warmth and happiness and pleasure and giving and good moments with Coca-Cola. And if you've seen any of Coke's ads over the past couple of years, you'll notice that they're always feel-good moments. If you want, feel free to pause this video, open a new tab on your Chromebook or your phone or whatever, and Coca-Cola commercial. I guarantee you, whatever commercial you pick, it will have some kind of feel-good moment. Go ahead and test the theory. I'll actually be shocked if you come across a Coca-Cola commercial that is not all warm and fuzzy or that doesn't try to give you the feels, because that's what they've been going for. So a logo is a special symbol combined with the brand name that associates the brand and the company and this identity with the product. And this symbol is called a logo. Now, you've all seen logos before. This is the logo. Do you know who this is for? This is for Honey Nut Cheerios. And Now, the bee isn't so popular anymore, but when I was a kid, I'm saying that a lot these days. When I was a kid, all the commercials were focused on this bee, and he would buzz around and entertain the kids and, like do the cute little, hey kids, and I don't remember the commercials well enough, but it was all about having a good, healthy breakfast for the kids. That was the main identity that they were trying to push with this logo was, good, healthy food for the kids. Now it's all about lowering cholesterol, and they don't really show the bee anymore. In fact, I don't think I have a box of churros in the house, but if you have a box of churros in the house, go have a look at it. And the bee probably isn't even on there. And that's because they've changed their identity over the years. I'm actually kind of interested. You know what? If you do have a box of Cheerios, go check it out. And if the bee is or isn't there, let me know in the comments. I'm actually kind of curious, but I'm pretty sure the bee is gone now. Now, there are 3 different forms of logos that we're going to look at. The first is called monogrammatic. It's a big word for stylized letters. Lots of companies, like Coca-Cola, have a logo like this. So it's just writing that's done in a stylized manner. I think this was inspired by calligraphy and different forms of fancy writing, and then companies just used it to try and turn, just writing their name into something more interesting than that. But you'll notice, I'm just going to go back. You'll notice that the choices that they make in terms of how their name is written is associated with the product. Because Coke got their start, and they have a giant stake in liquids, right? They sell flavored fluids is basically what they sell. Now, again, Coke owns a lot of stuff. Feel free to go ahead and do your own research. I'm not going to put it here because it doesn't have to do with branding. But Coke owns a lot of companies. But in terms of where they plaster their name the most is usually on a bottle or can of pop. And so these letters are very smooth and flowing and free. And so this is meant to be associated with the beverages, and it also kind of goes back to that feel-good moment, These letters are very free and wholesome and round and pleasant to look at, and they're laid back, and it's nice, but it's not overly done either, it doesn't look like that ridiculous calligraphy that you sometimes see on wedding invitations. It's almost to that point, especially with this big wave here. But they're selling liquids, right? So their name is associated with that. And it's kind of neat to see the different writing choices that people make, or that companies make, depending on what products they sell. Anyway, so that's monogrammatic. The second type of logo is visual. So these are just symbols, but the key thing is that these are symbols of real life things. So these are sort of IRL symbols, if you will. Where do the pictures go? Oh, there we go. Okay, so you don't see this particular Apple logo anymore. Now it's usually either black or white. But for a long time, Apple had a rainbow apple. And, this is on the sort of the fancier side, if you will, not because of the colors, but it's I want to say it's almost abstract, but I haven't gotten to abstract yet. But it's not an accurate drawing of an apple. Most apples don't look exactly like this. But this is sort of an abstract form of what an apple's outline looks like when a bite is taken out of it. It's close enough to an apple that it's put under the category of visual symbols because it's very clear that this is an apple. Now, an abstract symbol, oh God, the rectangle. Someday I'm going to figure out how to get rid of this. Now, an abstract symbol is just a shape. It's not an IRL shape. It's just a shape. So abstract symbols are the most artsy of the logos in the sense that they're very creatively inspired. And so the reason why I say that the apple is almost abstract is because you can tell it's an apple, but that's just by the outline. It doesn't actually look like a real apple. And this check mark it's just a check mark. It's not a real IRL object, and therefore we call it abstract. And there are lots of different examples of these three different types of logos. I'm going to come back to that in a second. But there are also combinations of these. You'll often see maybe monogrammatic with abstract, or you might see monogrammatic with visual. You don't usually see visual and abstract so much. You do occasionally, but not that often. Anyway, so these are a bunch of different common logos. And I wanted you to have a look and tell me what kind of logos these are. And you'll see a lot of them have a blend of things. I'll do a couple with you, and then I'll let you try the others on your own. But for example, here's Mercedes-Benz. Now, this part is monogrammatic because it's the words Mercedes-Benz. And it's kind of small, but the writing is very sharp and very clear, and it looks like it's written out of steel. And there's a reason for that. Now, stereotypically speaking, Germans have always been a very, very precise, very efficient, very engineering-oriented people. And by that I mean Germans are very well known for making things very well in a very high quality. Now, this is an old stereotype. That doesn't mean that all German things are, perfectly exact and extremely efficient. Mercedes used to be extremely high quality, and then they stopped being high quality when they changed the manufacturing methods. That's neither here nor there. But when they decided how they wanted to write their name, they wanted to do so in a way that communicated efficiency, simplicity, focus, high quality. And that's why they chose this very sharp, very simple, very clean font. Now, this is an abstract symbol. It's 3 spikes and a wheel. According to the company, this abstract symbol, it's not meant to be a wheel rim. Some people think it's meant to be a wheel rim, but it isn't. It's meant to demonstrate the domination of the land, sea, and sky. And that's what these 3 points are. Now, that's not clearly communicated through here. But that's what their design method was at the time. So you could argue that this isn't, it's very visually appealing, but no one would look at this and think, oh yes, the domination of the land, sea, and sky. Got it. I didn't even know that until I looked it up. This logo design is BMW's logo. Now, if you didn't know, BMW is an old company. They've been around for over 100 years. And back in the early 1900s, they designed German fighter planes. And they also built a lot of aircraft engines that were used for, commercial purposes and other things. So originally, their logo is spinning propeller blades, which is the white and the blue sky. I always thought it was just, I thought it was abstract, and it is, but I thought it was just a symmetrical white, blue. But it's not. It's spinning propeller blades in the blue sky. And after I found that out, I never looked at another BMW logo the same again. It's interesting, though, because I never would have guessed that in a million years. I thought it was just the colors they went with. So this is monogrammatic and abstract. And it was inspired by what they used to make. So going back to the other logos. So some of these are old, some of these you'll still recognize. But for example, we look at Starbucks, monogrammatic, and I'm going to say this is abstract because it's not, whoever this is, it's not a human being. They have fins for hands, it looks like. And this is a crown, and I don't really know if this is a human or a mermaid or a goddess or anything. I have no idea. Here's a much clearer example of monogrammatic and abstract. Words, symbols. What's another one? Yahoo, just monogrammatic. So is Google. Now this one, Century 21, this is tricky. This is a real estate company, by the way. This is monogrammatic, but this, hard to say. I'm going to say visual because, I mean, it's clearly a house, but this line here throws me off. I think it's supposed to be a garage, but I mean, it's just a line, so you could make an argument either way. So why brand? Companies do it to convey the image of the product, and mainly they do this to build and retain customer loyalty. Shout out to Garrett. How you doing, buddy? But that's why they do it. Again, people are very instinctual, trusting, judgmental, and they associate a collection of feelings and values with a brand very quickly. They also brand to gain a position in the market. Remember we talked about what a market is? The collection of sellers and consumers. There's a lot of people and a lot of competitors and a lot of purchasing going on. It's a noisy place, metaphorically speaking. There's a lot of information being thrown around. And brands help you stand out. It also aids in advertising and promotion. I wrote these differently for a reason, but we don't have time to get into it, so we're going to move on. Slogans. So there are different types. First is play on words. So for example, Blue Jays, the baseball team, the Blue Jay Fever, catch it. So that's their slogan. I always thought that was kind of cute, because you catch a baseball. Chicago Bulls, see red. You guys know what happens when a bull sees a red color on the spectrum? They go berserk. Explanation of what the product does. So a great example of that is NyQuil. I need a sniffling, sneezing, coughing, aching, stuffing head, fever so you can rest medicine. They actually say all that, and they make it sound much better than I just did. They also have another one. It's not NyQuil. What is it? Buckley's. That's it. It's Buckley's. Have you ever heard the Buckley's thing? It tastes awful and it works. That was Buckley's slogan for a long time. I don't know if it still is or not. But here's something to blow your mind. Long time ago, when Buckley's did its thing, they didn't know how to make a good tasting medicine. So they just, and I believe they were operating with very limited funds. So they made a medicine and they didn't bother flavoring it because they couldn't afford to do it. So they just sold the medicine and it tasted like crap. Now, they, in a brilliant move of marketing genius, instead of trying to cover it up or shift attention away from that, they embraced it. And they said, you know what, let's just take it and run with it. It tastes awful, but it makes you feel better. And they landed on the slogan, it tastes awful and it works. Now, after a while, when the company was in a better financial position, they actually made the medicine taste much better for a while. And you know what happened? Sales plummeted because everyone figured, oh God, they've changed their recipe. It doesn't work anymore. It's not the same stuff that it used to be. This is a whole different product now, and I don't want it. And so Buckley's actually stopped trying to make it taste good because they were losing money. Description of the product: Duracell, a copper top battery. Now, they've changed their slogan a bunch of times. Now I think it's it's Duracell, trusted by something. They've said it a bunch of different ways, but it's trusted by something. What else? Benefit of the product: Ivory soap, 99 and 44 out of 100% pure. So they say 99.44% pure. So for people who have skin conditions like eczema and stuff like that, the kind of soap that you use can cause you to break out. And Ivory has always had a reputation for having soaps that were very gentle on the skin. Now, I don't know how true that is. I don't think I've ever used Ivory soap. I don't have a skin condition, so I never needed to. But apparently their soap is very gentle on the skin, and that's why they have that slogan. Oh. Last thing is something about the company. So, DeFasco, our product is steel, our strength is people. I like that one. It sounds like a battle chant. Anyway, so these are the different kinds of slogans and the different types. Next slide. Okay, there we go. Why are brands used? Now, we've talked about this. Brands are used to differentiate the product from the competition. I repeat because it's important. We call this product of differentiation, if you couldn't have guessed. A brand helps shoppers understand and remember the product or service for its benefits. So remember how I said people are very trusting and judgmental? They are, and this is not an insult, it's just the facts. So when people buy a product and use it, whether it's buying a drink or eating something or buying something to help repair their laneway, who knows, they will remember that experience of using the product, and they will attach that experience to the brand. Now, marketers hope that shoppers will remember their product before any other, and this is called top-of-mind branding. So, marketers and companies are constantly working to get their products to be your top-of-mind product for whatever the need that they satisfy is, the need or want that they satisfy. So, for example, if you're thirsty, Coke wants you to think about them before you think about water. Now, I'm not saying that they're evil geniuses trying to get you to drink their stuff instead of water. What I'm saying is that when you're thirsty, they want you to think of them first. Now, their branding has worked very hard to associate themselves with good times. So maybe their goal would be, if you're going to hang out with friends or if you're going to spend some time with your parents, if you like spending time with your parents, maybe you'll share a Coke together. Who knows? But, you know, when you want to listen to music, Apple wants you to think of iTunes. Spotify wants you to think of Spotify. And so whatever thing you think of first when you have a need or want that you want to satisfy, whatever company that is, that's your top of mind company for you. Value of brands. We got to move on. So, brand loyalty. This is Garrett's territory. Brand loyalty is what happens when consumers make repeat purchases of the same brand. So it's customer loyalty, except it's to a brand. Brand creates faith in the customer. So, for example, when you get a craving for a hamburger, where are you going to go? Now, your answer is going to differ depending on who you are. So, for example, when I asked that question, my mind went to Big Mac, McDonald's. I don't eat at McDonald's anymore, and I wouldn't go now with, the whole COVID thing. But that's where my mind went. But your mind might have gone to Wendy's or to Burger King or wherever. And one of the reasons for that is top of mind. The other reason is because your brain has forged a neural connection with what you believe a burger should be and what these companies provide. Isn't that crazy when you think about it? So when your brain opens the mental drawer of hamburgers, inside is going to be what your brain wants your hamburger eating experience to be. So, and companies have worked to make that happen. And so when you go to a fast food restaurant, whatever it may be, your brain has faith and trust that the food that you get, whatever it is going to be exactly what you think it's going to be. For example, whether you get a Big Mac here or in Nova Scotia, your brain believes that it will offer you the exact same experience. And that's because your brain has built faith in that product and in that brand. So the big thing here is customers know what to expect and they have confidence in what they buy. Your brain has that experience wired inside and it's looking forward to experiencing that again. And when you go there, you expect that you will have that same experience. And whether you do or don't, renews or destroys your faith in the company. And that's why companies care about what consumers think. Okay, this is an article that you can read. You do not have to read this. If you're interested in this sort of thing and you want to take your learning to a higher level, by all means go here. If you don't want to, don't worry about it. But I will say, brands carry value. They're worth something, monetarily speaking. And because a brand is not a thing, it's not an object, it's an abstract idea, the most reliable way that we can estimate its value is by what an author, Erskine, I'm not sure who this person is, but they're an authority on branding, calls the willingness to pay test. Basically what this means is, how willing would you be to buy a product from a company that you've never tried? The product, not the company. So what I mean is, and a great example of this is pre-ordering games. You see this all the time. A company will say, hey, we're coming out with this new game, and it's going to be epic, and it's going to be insane, and you're going to get so many kills, and you're going to get this and that. And they can say that, but whether it's true or not, who knows? The game hasn't come out yet. But you will have a certain willingness to go out on a limb and take them at their word. And depending on what this company is, you'll have either more or less trust on it. So, for example, with Call of Duty, Infinity War has worked very hard to give you the same Call of Duty experience with every game. Now, they try to improve things each time, but they try to give you the same gameplay experience. Now, that could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. But when the new Call of Duty comes out, your willingness to buy the game before you've played it tells you what the brand's value is. And anyone who pre-orders a game before playing it has a very high willingness to pay, and therefore the brand is worth a lot of money. This bottle represents all the money that Coke is worth. The value of all of Coca-Cola, the factories, the I said the people. I don't mean buying the people. I mean, when you buy a company, you get the employees as well, right? They'll just work for you now instead of for whoever they worked for before. So the value of the factories, the employees, all of the stockpiled product, all of it, is worth about $50 billion. Now, it's probably more than that now. Not so much right now because of COVID, but let's say a few months ago, it would have been worth more than this. But anyway, let's just go with the figures. All the factories, all the stockpiled product, everything that Coke owns, is worth about $50 billion. Coke's brand is worth $120 billion. Now, this is an estimate, but people have made offerings to buy the company in the past, and these offerings are confidential, but there is research to back this up. And that's because Coke's willingness to buy value on their products is through the roof. It is insane. Coke has come out with so many different products, and people buy them in waves, pun intended, because they have a lot of faith that Coke wouldn't release a new beverage unless it was good. Right? And what this boils down to is the fact that you can, or I should say Coke, can make a new product, roll it on the market, and be virtually certain that they will make X amount of dollars. And that is extraordinarily valuable. It means that you can take risks and make new products and sell them and not take a large amount of financial damage by investing in a dead product. That's not going to happen because people have faith in Coke. And so Coke's brand is worth more than double of all the factories and all the employees and all the products and everything put together, all the offices, everything. Now, here's a term that's important to remember. A charismatic brand is any product, service, or organization for which people believe there is no substitute. So the top of mind branding is excellent. Charismatic brand is the holy grail. And when you've reached this sort of God-tier status, you've made it, essentially. Your company will likely go on for far longer than the owner's lifetime because you have established yourself as the king. You know, you sit in the throne. Your products are the go-tos, and there is no substitute, and there never will be. At least that's what you're trying to maintain. Apple has this title. There is no substitute for an iPhone. You either have an iPhone or you don't have an iPhone. That's it. Benefits of a good brand. Lots of them. It's why companies spend lots of money on brands, and it's why brands are worth so much. So brand leadership is maintained over a long period of time. Brand extensions are possible. Don't worry about what that is. We don't have time to go into it. Easy for consumers to identify goods and services. So people can spot your products very easily by looking for the brands. And that makes it very, very likely that if they've bought your product once, they'll buy it again. It assures purchasers of the consistent quality so they know what to expect. Advertisements are recognized. They know who's making the advertisements. Reduces selling time and effort. A lot of companies can just slap their brand on a product, and that does like 80% of the sales job for them. All they got to do is really explain what it is or show a competitive advantage and then slap their brand on it, and bam, sales effort's done. People will buy it based on that alone. You ever seen an Apple commercial? They never tell you anything. They just show the sleek new MacBook Air, and they spin it around, and then they show the Apple, and that's the commercial. Done. It reduces price comparisons, so people will buy more likely because of the brand than because of the price. It may be the one thing that competitors can't copy. Remember we talked about sustainable advantages? Some companies don't have any except for customer loyalty because of their brand. And it adds prestige to their products. So it makes their product special in the minds of the consumers because of the brand that goes with it. All right, types of brands. There are three. The first is a national brand. This is just a standard boilerplate brand. It's a product that's branded by the manufacturer's brand and is typically supported by heavy advertising. So Coke, Heinz, all of these. Now you might be saying, hey, Mr. C, Coke is an international company. You are 100% right, observant student. But Coca-Cola's brand will change from nation to nation. Or, I mean, sometimes they can work very hard to make their advertising and their branding uniform across nations. But for the most part, companies will have a different brand image for each country. Do you know why? Culture. If you said culture, then you are 100% correct. A private brand is a label or brand that a retailer creates to exploit their corporate image. So what that means is that only the retailer can sell it. So you guys know what a retailer is. Remember we talked about it? A retailer is a company that buys products from one company and sells it to people. That's a nutshell explanation of what a retailer is. So it allows the retailer company to differentiate themselves and control the price and quality of the products they sell. And some examples are Loblaws President's Choice, Shoppers Drug Mart's Life brand. So Life medication, it usually comes in white bottles, and the Life is in red. HBC's Togo brand. Another example is Irresistibles. If you go to Metro, that's their version of President's Choice. The next type of brand, and this is the last, I believe, is generic brands. They're also called no-name brands, but we try not to call them that because there's actually a generic brand called No Name. So it gets confusing. They are always the lowest cost because the labeling and packaging is cheaper. There is minimal promotion for this type of brand. Originally, I wrote no because I've never actually seen a no-name commercial. There are some, but they are very far in between. And the reason for this is because they can't afford to make them, or at least they couldn't. They used to not be able to afford to make them. Now that there's, social media and very cheap forms of advertising, generic brands can afford to make them. And that doesn't mean that they're broke. It just means that they don't have the money to fund those kinds of expensive commercials and keep their profits. See, the thing is that generic brands are very cheap. Now, that doesn't mean that they're low quality. They're usually not as high quality as their competitors, but they're not crap either, Like they're just made on the lower income scale of things. But their profits are very small per unit. So, for example, if it costs them, let's say it costs them $1 to make this baking powder. They might sell it for like $1.25 because they want to be cheap, right? The whole point of being a generic brand is to sell at a very cheap price. Now, we're going to get into this a little more in the price section of this unit next week. But when we talked about this in class, if you recall that profit is whatever money is left over after you pay expenses. So if you charge $1.25 for customers to buy this, and it costs you $1 to make, then your profit is 25 cents. That's not a lot per product. Now, if you sell millions of these, then those 25 cents are going to add up very fast. But another brand, let's say a national brand, might make $1.50 off of one container. Now, they'll probably sell fewer containers because they're more expensive, but their profit per container is much higher. So usually, companies with higher profit margins per container can afford more promotion. Even though No Name makes decent stuff, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not crazy good. The takeaways. So here we are at the end of the branding lesson. So here are the questions that we explored at the start of the lesson, and hopefully you have answers to all these now. So what is branding? What is it that makes brands valuable? There's a couple different reasons. Why do businesses brand themselves? And there's a bunch of reasons for that. And what are the 3 main brands? So you should be able to answer all these questions now, and in fairly high levels of detail. So take a couple minutes and recall what we've gone through and try to answer these. And that's it. That's it for this week's lesson material. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions or concerns or confusion, send me an email. Talk to me during my office hours, and we'll get you sorted out. Okay? Anyway, so that's it. Have a good week. Make sure you get your work done, and make sure you take care of yourselves. And I will see you in the next video.